says you have to marry for love? Welcome to Azimuth Podcast. I'm Kimberly McNabb, and with me, as always, is my loving husband, Barrett McNabb.
Hello, everybody.
Well, 4 people were caught running a large-scale marriage scam to get green cards for 600 migrants, per the DOJ. 4 Philippine nationals have been charged in Massachusetts after running a large-scale marriage fraud agency marked to illegal immigrants, authorities said. They said that 50-year-old Marcelito Benitez operated the agency in a brick-and-mortar office in Los Angeles between October 2016 and March of 2022.
Yeah, so these scam marriages were, not only did they get married, but then they also made adjustments to the client's immigration status to show those marriages and charged $20,000 to $35,000 in cash in order to have this go through.
That's an expensive wedding.
The agency even produced fake wedding ceremonies. I mean, they had the whole kit and caboodle. They'd have the little archway with a destination background. They'd have their clients hold signs that said just married. They'd take photographs of the you may kiss your bride portion. And I mean, absolutely just a top-notch illegal operation going on in order to have illegal migrants be able to have the possibility of getting green cards because they were married to an American citizen.
Along with orchestrating scam marriages, authorities said that the businesses circumvented U.S. immigration laws by claiming that the migrants had been abused by their American spouses.
Yeah, so let's go into a little bit of context there. So what would go on is the scammers, the person running the business, charging the $20,000 to $35,000, they would coach their clients on how to falsify and pass the immigration interview process to say, yes, no, we are deeply in love. Here's how we met. This is a true love story. But if eventually the American citizen decided to get a little bit of cold feet, then the migrant that is utilizing these services in order to be able to stay here would claim abuse. And then that way it triggers a whole bunch of protections to say I'm being abused by my spouse, and therefore I need protection to stay inside the United States.
So a little bit like asylum.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, exactly. So, if these American citizens, again, they got cold feet, there would be an opportunity for them to just, the migrants to claim abuse. And it's really difficult for the American citizen to threaten back and say, well, if you do that, then I'll say that this was a sham marriage. Guess what? Everybody goes to jail.
Trouble. Yes.
I mean,
so it would be an interesting conversation. When we got married in Virginia,
right?
And on our paperwork at the courthouse, it asked if we had ever been married before. So I don't know what it's like in other states, but I imagine if they do ask that question, that'd be quite an interesting conversation for when the U.S. citizen gets married later.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously,
remarried later.
They're getting a portion probably of the money. They're definitely not getting $20,000 out of it. I can tell you that the scammers who were operating the business were taking the lion's share of this. But still, it just goes to show that it is just trying to find loopholes in the law in order to work around the legal immigration system. And this just goes along with another similar type scam, which is birth tourism. There's multiple ways this works, but it often is Chinese nationals will get on a vacation or on an airplane, and they are 8 months and 3.5 weeks pregnant, and they will land in Guam and then give birth. Boom. The person is now a U.S. citizen, and they'll load the baby up and go home to China.
Well, wouldn't Guam tip over from all that? Those people coming. If you didn't see last week's episode, check it out.
Yeah, exactly. Georgia congressman was thinking that if you put too many people on Guam, it would tip over, which is pretty hilarious. But still, the same thing in San Francisco. There are Chinese birth hostels where Chinese women that are heavily pregnant will fly into San Francisco, give birth into these hostels, and then all the paperwork's filed. And then again, they're not staying here, they're flying back.
And why wouldn't they stay?
You know, I just can't think of any positive reason why they would not want to stay here, but a negative reason would be so that later on they could be raised by the Chinese Communist Party and be able to come back and say, here's my American passport, let me back in. And it's an easy way for an intelligence operative that is homegrown in China to come back to the United States. And you know, also I could see it as just the backup plan. You know, if they ever decided to leave China, they have an easy way to get back into the United States with their child. But still, I mean, one would think if you want to be an American citizen, why wouldn't you stay? So I could only think of truly nefarious reasons why they would fly back.
Because they could be a good anchor baby.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's something that that South American immigrants and not to say South American immigrants. I mean, obviously, this is anybody that comes into the United States and has a baby with the deliberate purpose of creating a U.S. citizen in order to be able to claim various immigration statuses, you know, is that term, is that anchor baby. But still, my feeling is that there is starting to become an appetite to look at the birthright citizenship. The U.S. Department of Justice and the Constitution, obviously with the amendments that allow for birthright citizenship, you know, need to be looked at. And there are a number of presidential candidates right now that said that we need to do an executive order, look at this birthright citizenship and have it be removed. I mean, we have to look back at what the purpose was. The purpose was after the Civil War, when Lincoln freed the slaves. There was a question of whether or not former slaves were citizens, right? And so it needed to be enshrined in the Constitution with an amendment to allow these people to say, yes, they were born here, they're citizens in the United States, and that's what the purpose of it was. The United States is one of the very few countries that have birthright citizenship, and the language could be interpreted because the language says, born to people who are under the jurisdiction of the United States of America. It could be an argument that says, well, if you're a foreign national that's responsible for a different country and a different jurisdiction, you might not apply, right? And so there is language that's being looked at to see about rescinding or taking a look at the Supreme Court looking at ending birthright citizenship. The vast majority of nations in the world, you have to have two parents that are citizens of that country in order to become a citizen. So it's not just because you're born there, you get to be a citizen of that country. Your parents also have to be citizens of that country.
Well, I imagine that would be about as politically popular as, as Ben Shapiro earlier this week has been attacked online for suggesting that we raise the minimum retirement age and to adjust Social Security, which is a necessary evil, but people care more about getting reelected than actually doing what's good for the country. Yeah,
I mean I agree. I mean any change that is going to seem as though some right is being taken away, it automatically causes political controversy. But honestly, the United States needs to relook its birthright citizenship, and I can see the argument being made that by coming into the country illegally, you are not subject to the laws of the United States. I mean, oftentimes progressive Democrats will make the argument for you that coming into the United States and crossing the border undetected is not an illegal act. And so if that's true, then are they subject to jurisdiction? So that argument can be flipped on its head. Obviously, it is an illegal act because it violates U.S. code. But still,
why have the immigration laws if that's not going to...
Exactly. So, one of the things that this kind of jogged my memory, and this is just, talking about scam marriages, right? So one of the things that recalled my memory a long time ago when I was an ROTC cadet, I was talking to an enlisted service member, and they were talking about how there are a number of military personnel that are enlisted that get married, and sometimes officers as well, that get married fraudulently in order to move out of the barracks. And so on the by and by, things change a little bit, but typically it's staff sergeant and below, so E6 and below typically live in the barracks, and then once you get married or promoted to E7, oftentimes you can move out of the barracks and get basic allowance for housing, BAH. And so moving into the local economy, getting an apartment, getting a house or whatever it is. And so oftentimes what will happen is you'll get two enlisted soldiers that are below E5 who will get married that have no intention of actually being married. They'll collect the basic allowance for housing and go get off-post housing in a 2-bedroom apartment. And they will live completely separate lives. They'll have their own dating going on.
Which adultery in the military is still illegal, isn't it?
You're absolutely
so
right.
It's quite a risk.
Yeah, so
for a bigger apartment.
They would be guilty of adultery at the letter of the law. So, but still, it's a scam. So they'll both collect BAH, the basic allowance for housing, and the basic allowance for subsistence as well, and they're pocketing the money and they're having their own lives. Now, the problem is people get caught. Obviously people get caught. It's a rumor will eventually happen that, hey, so and so is doing whatever, we saw whatever, and then investigation starts, and then people just get caught. But still, I've also heard of officers doing this as well, getting married, and they both get a high level BAH, and they'll buy a house and they use it as investment income. But in some instances, they actually aren't really married in the eyes of God. They're just on a piece of paper and they have their own lives. And again, that's going to be a problem. So when I looked at this marriage scam, it just kind of, jogged my memory of that conversation that I had long ago. It's sad that it happens because obviously it's a crime. But here we go. We have people that are trying to get around immigration laws fraudulently. And it causes a lot of heartbreak. And you've got an American citizen that's involved in it. They go to jail as well.
That's a huge risk. I imagine that they aren't getting a large portion of that $20,000 to $30,000, and to get divorced later, I mean, if it's contested, it could easily cost more than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a headache.
Worth it, but this the scam ended in 2022.
Right.
So really, people are getting to stay anyways.
Right.
So why bother going through the risk of an illegal marriage now?
Yeah, and also you have all of the waste of time with the investigators, because they're now going to have to look back at each of those 600 marriages, and if the people just absolutely profess, I paid to get this, but we're the exception of we do love each other and we did get married for a real reason. Now you got to go through all these interview process again and try and figure out if it was fraudulent or not. But we saw this article and we wanted to bring it to you.
Well, thank you for joining us on Azimuth Podcast. Stay tuned for these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.
Welcome to Azimuth Podcast. I'm Kimberly McNabb, and joining me, as always, is my loving husband, Barrett McNabb.
Hello, everybody.
Last week, we watched Father Time yelling at clouds in the State of the Union address. There was a Republican rebuttal, and from the Independent Party was Robert Kennedy Jr.'s take on the State of the Union. Let's watch.
I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and I'm running as an independent candidate for President of the United States. I grew up in an America that seemed to have achieved its promise as an exemplary nation. Modern democracy had spread from one nation, ours, in 1776 to 6 by 1865 and to 190 by the 1960s. We had become the city on the hill. We were a moral authority around the globe. Our government, institutions, our Congress, the court, the regulatory agencies, and even the American press were renowned for their integrity, and they were revered worldwide. Other nations wanted our American leadership. They knew the difference between leadership and bullying, which is something our current leaders seem to have forgotten. We were the template of liberty, proof that for a country to thrive, its people must be free. Free to speak, free to worship, free to build great companies, free to start small businesses. We were the freest country in the world, and by no coincidence, also the most prosperous. Working Americans could provide for their families on a single salary. They could buy a home, raise a family, save for retirement without mountains of debt. We made the best music, we made the best movies, we made gold standard automobiles that everybody in the world wanted. We made blue jeans, we reconstructed Europe.
So this is kind of interesting. I mean, he's leaning heavily on imagery for his uncle and his father, on the video side. But still, it kind of is interesting that he is referencing an era of the 50s and 60s with the cars and the blue jeans and the music, similar to the era that Donald Trump is getting his MAGA, Make America Great Again. And that's kind of interesting that he is also highlighting that same time period.
And the same sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, so it's really interesting that he's comparing that. And let's keep going.
We put men on the moon. We're the world's healthiest, best educated children. Our productivity, ingenuity, our can-do spirit were the envy of the world. We had confidence in our strength, our capacity, and the limitless potential of our country. Yeah, we had serious racial and environmental problems, but in the heady days of my youth, the environmental movement and the civil rights movement were picking up steam. My father and some of his allies were fighting to eliminate the last pockets of hunger in Appalachia and the Mississippi Delta and on the Indian reservations. And we became for the first time a true constitutional democracy in this country, with all races voting and holding political office. Other countries aspired to be like us, and our children grew up proud of their passport, proud of their flag. My uncle, President Kennedy, left us a legacy of peace and the hope of ending the arms race and winding down the Cold War. Those were the traditions of freedom, prosperity, and peace that my father, my uncle, and Martin Luther King Jr. were striving to protect and advance. In the half century since their deaths, we've lost touch with that vision for our country.
You know, one of the things I think that's important, again, he's heavily leaning on the imagery and even makes the references of his father and his uncle and Martin Luther King as well. He's talking about a time, and it looks like he's about to say, look, we're in decline. And again, I just can't say this enough. I mean, the media isn't covering him at all.
What they did to him in the DNC is completely wrong. I mean, they said
right.
If you show up to campaign in the early states, delegates aren't going to go to you. I mean, it's just horrible what they did to him. But he did say constitutional democracy, and I always like, no, it's constitutional republic.
Right.
But he talks about how kids used to be proud of their citizenship or their passport. Well, you have several generations where we're constantly bad-mouthing the United States of America. What do you expect?
Right.
We don't do that anymore. Of course.
Right. Yeah. So let's like he kind of warmed us up for what we were in the past, and I think he's about to spin us up for what he sees going on right now.
And I want to tell you right now that we can still restore that America, the America that almost was, and yet may be. But we have to start by being honest with ourselves. Neither my uncle nor my father would recognize the version of America that we have today. We become a nation of chronic illness, of violence, of loneliness, depression, and division, and poverty. Our great cities are becoming tent encampments, modern-day Hoovervilles filled with undocumented immigrants and dispossessed Americans and people living in their cars, plagued by mental illness and addiction and despair. Our border has come under the control of criminal drug cartels that traffic in desolation and fentanyl, and in busloads of desperate human beings. Our children are drowning in a crisis of alienation, of dispossession, and complete disconnection from their communities.
One of the things to highlight with this, it turns out I was right. We are when going down into kind of a darker area, but whose fault is this? Whose fault is the immigration crisis? Whose fault is the drug use? Whose fault is the increase in crime? And as we can see, it is lax on crime, heavily Democrat areas that we're seeing the greatest amount of this problem.
Well, Katie Britt, in her response to the State of the Union address, she said that President Joseph Biden inherited the best border policies of all time. And it kind of makes me think, he should have just left it alone.
Right.
It's like a toddler who's got to touch the thing. And then it's completely ruined, completely breaks. Like, all you had to do is leave it alone.
Right.
So it just makes me think of that. Like, okay, old man, don't touch stuff.
Right. I completely agree with you. If he had left it alone and then having a secure border worked on ways to increase legal immigration.
Yes, that's what
that would have been
should have
an
been
ideal.
Expediting the backlog of people who are going the legal route. Expedite that.
Right. So yeah, we're seeing this darker turn. So let's keep going.
We've lost far more of our young people to drugs in the last decade than in the 20-year Vietnam War. We've printed 9 centuries worth of money in a little over a decade and spent $8 trillion on regime change wars. Those wars have made America less safe, our country less strong, and the world far less stable, while sending prices through the roof as our infrastructure falls apart. Tens of millions of young Americans no longer even dream of owning their own home. What happened to America, the land of opportunity, where you could be sure that if you worked hard and played by the rules, that you would have a decent life? All the new wealth of the last generation has gone to the billionaires and to transnational corporations, while our tattered middle class, our infrastructure, our industry have been hollowed out from the inside. Instead of promise, we've left our kids sick and drowning in debt. The public debt has gone from about $5 trillion under President George W. Bush to $34 trillion today, and U.S. household debt is at a record high of $17.3 trillion. If you include discouraged workers, our true unemployment rate is 23%.
I want to highlight that. So, just to educate our audience, the unemployment rate includes, it's a formula, the amount of people that want a job and are looking for a job. Okay, that's what the unemployment is.
That's how they're measuring it when they state it at the federal level, which currently is at 3.9%.
Right. And the discouraged workers, he's about to throw up a number, but the discouraged numbers are people who want a job, can't get a job, and so therefore have stopped looking, right? And so if you don't include them in the unemployment rate looks great.
Young parents face housing, grocery, and childcare costs that are unaffordable. Too many Americans are living bleak and hopeless lives, dreading the one medical emergency or the car repair that will tip them over the edge into homelessness.
I hate stopping it that early, but because, this is, we have full-time jobs. We're regular mom and dad that have full-time jobs. We're small business owners, and we're doing YouTube as a side gig. We would love to work out, to continue to monetize our channel. We are monetized, but we know exactly this. We just recently had a $5,000 auto repair bill, and we had to do some mental gymnastics in order to figure out how to pay it. So
yeah,
I feel
relate.
that.
I do want to circle back to the unemployment rate that he quoted. I think the federal unemployment rate is a little artificially skewed because they're not going to count people who were retired, who couldn't afford to stay retired, had to go back to work, and people getting second jobs because they could not afford to live the way they were currently.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's a great point, and actually jogged my memory as well, is that the jobs, when you're saying this administration is creating jobs, the administration is replacing the jobs that were lost.
Yes, I think COVID lost 10 million jobs, and so President Biden likes to say, "Oh, I've created 14 million jobs." No, 10 million came back, approximately, and then probably some of that extra 4 million are people going back to work after retirement or getting a second job. I'm sure that is some of it.
Right, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. But anyway, the might not be able to have the money or one car repair do. We feel the pain. We do.
We rank 40th globally in our people's health and wellness. Out of the richest countries in the world, the United States is 35th in child poverty rates, just above Mexico. We rank 36th in literacy and 45th in press freedom. We have one of the highest cancer rates in the world, and our life expectancy now ranks 59th, according to the World Bank. That's right behind Algeria, which spends less than 1/30th per capita of what we spend. But even these grim figures hide the full picture of our dire health crisis. We now have the worst health outcomes in the rich world, the highest maternal mortality rates, the highest number of gun deaths per capita, and the highest number of teen pregnancies. We lead the world in obesity and chronic disease. According to CDC, 60% of Americans have at least one chronic condition. When my uncle was president, only 6% of Americans had chronic disease. And all of these plights fall heaviest on our young people. 4 in 10 of them suffer depression, and half of them have considered suicide. 1 in 10 has anxiety. 1 in 10 has ADHD. 1 in 5 is obese. It's time for us to say enough is enough. We were once a free and thriving nation, the healthiest and strongest in the world. What we once were, we can be again. How do I know that? It's because everywhere I go in this country, I see a profound determination among Americans to heal. We might have become the sickest country on earth, but we also have the most ingenious healers, both inside and outside conventional medicine. We may have sky-high levels of depression and addiction, but we also have innovators who have opened up new frontiers in recovery. We have some of the world's most depleted agricultural soils, but also some of the world's most innovative and energetic regenerative farmers. We have serious economic problems, but we also have the brightest and most ambitious entrepreneurs. We face hunger and homelessness, and yet we meet it with the highest philanthropic rates in the world and bottomless kindness and compassion. We may be on the mat today, but we can be on our feet and happy and healthy and strong again with good leadership tomorrow.
There's not a lot to argue with there.
Right.
It does take a strong leader, but what the strong leader has to do is get away from the far left. The far left, the radicals are just absolutely ruining this country. They're allowing bad policy in the guise of humanitarian...
And under the guise of empathy. I'm sorry, but empathy is one of the greatest wolves in sheep's clothing. I mean, like the immigration, feel sorry for the people. They're just escaping for a better life or whatever. Where's the empathy for the victims of violent crime? Where's the empathy for all the tax-paying citizens that stuff's being given away and you can't walk down the street without violence or, people living on the street?
Homeless veterans.
Yes, and where's this empathy for all the people who are waiting in line for treatment with the VA when the VA is giving out benefits to illegal immigrants? So I think your empathy is misplaced.
Right. Now, there's definitely no doubt that the United States has a bountiful economy and can help out people, but it should be focused inward first.
If we destroy our first, we won't be around to help other people.
And then to send and help everybody else out. So, it's almost like what my mother says, do the things you have to do before you do the things you want to do.
Yes.
Our people and our system were built for resilience. And here's the most important thing I want to tell you about the state of our union. Our nation seems more divided than ever, but Americans everywhere want to heal that divide. Our nation has become artificially divided by political forces that can survive only when we, the people, are at war with each other.
That's a great point.
I love how he mentioned the divide while scrolling. I'm not that active on Twitter. Just kind of recently I've gotten on, and I see some pretty crazy stuff out there. I'm like,
Right.
No, I'll stick to, watching cute corgi videos on Instagram.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously we have the huge discussion on TikTok and its role in having the ability to influence people. And it's kind of interesting that TikTok, the big concern is that ByteDance could give information to the Chinese Communist Party at any time they wanted to, and so that's a big concern. So also having the ability to influence elections, having the ability to spread propaganda. ByteDance says none of that's true. So here's a big thing. They sent out a message, ByteDance did, to TikTok users and said, look, type in your zip code and contact your House of Representatives representative and call them and tell them you don't want TikTok to be canceled. You don't want them to ban TikTok in the United States. And the interesting thing is so you have a company that influenced tens of thousands of their users contact their representatives, and
Or
a lot
they
of
normally don't know who they are.
Sure. And they contact them. The messages they left were mainly of men who don't want TikTok to go away because then they're not going to watch their little anime girls doing dances.
Yeah, and then also, if that's not bad enough, teenagers saying, I'm going to kill myself. First of all, when did we let little tyrants /terrorists /teenagers dictate what grown men do? Also, they can't vote.
Right.
And I'm sorry, but anybody who's had a kid says they're going to do all sorts of things and don't actually mean it.
Well, I mean, but I want to reemphasize that the teenagers called and left messages on congressmen's cell phone, not cell phones, but their official lines saying, threatening suicide. If you take away TikTok, I will commit suicide. That is a huge problem. You're telling me that that's not a propaganda
your life,
machine?
Yeah, your life revolves around one app so much that you can't go on living, really?
So, but anyway, that's some of the danger is this polarization that we're seeing is that big tech is sending out and censoring some conservative voices in favor of the ones that they want to have happen. And of course, you're going to have this polarization. Mm-hmm. It truly is.
People are tired of being manipulated by fear. We learned that lesson during COVID. We recognize that the same techniques of manipulating fear are being used by elites today to corral us into voting for one political candidate or the other. Americans are tired of these dire warnings that to preserve democracy itself, you better vote for our guy. I can tell you that in every state of this union, people are rejecting fear-mongering. 80% of Americans say they don't want to be forced to choose in this election between the lesser of two evils. They're tired of voting against something or someone. I see it in the crowds of mixed Republicans and Democrats and independents who attend my rallies that a growing number of Americans are rejecting divisiveness. They're ready to unite, to rebuild this country, and to fulfill the promise of the America of my youth. They're ready to vote for something and for someone they like, for someone who represents hope and healing, or someone with a inspiring vision for America's future.
That's a good point, is that he is saying, look, I couldn't be a Democrat, so I'm going to run as an independent. And instead of it's me or the other guy, here's a third option. I mean, we all know that 70% of Americans do not want to see a rematch between Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
Yeah, the match of the home for mom. It's just,
yeah,
it's ridiculous. So, unfortunately, we do experience most elections as voting between the lesser of the two evils. Like in 2015, one of my friends who I knew was on the left she kind of asked me who I was going to vote for, and instead of trying to demonize the other side, I said, most people view most elections as voting between the lesser of the two evils, And, of course, I have to mention South Park because there's an episode that was written during the Clinton versus Trump election, and it was choosing between a douche and a turd sandwich.
Okay.
So, and that's kind of how a lot of people feel right now.
Right.
8 years, nothing's changed.
Yep. So anyway, his message, we're going to keep going because there's a little bit left, but his message seems to be, look, there is an alternative to vote, and it's kind of interesting that he's bringing that spin on it.
For a future that they can believe in. So that's the State of the Union that I want to bring you today. It's a nation that hungers to heal. It's a nation ready to face reality, to rebuild, to end the forever foreign wars, to clean out the corrupt Washington establishment, and to turn again toward peace, freedom, good health, and prosperity. When we unite in that vision, we're going to be unstoppable. Thank you, and God bless you.
Okay, so this is to bring up that statistic again. That 70% of people do not want to see a rematch. I have said that if it's not this election cycle, and I think this election cycle is going to be important. If it's not this election cycle, 2028, I think we will definitely see a major third-party option. Now we're, poised to have a strong third-party candidate in this election, just because there's so many people that are looking for an alternative.
Well, also the Kennedy last name, which another
Sure.
reason why, another way in which he has been very wronged is President Biden refused Secret Service detail for him.
Right.
He's a Kennedy.
Right.
Hello? Not exactly a good string of good luck running through that family.
That entire family.
So yeah, he's been wronged. I do like him that the Constitution, Declaration of Independence imagery. Some of the younger audience is probably going, "What's that writing?" It's called cursive. They used to write everything in it, but there's just the patriotic sentiment behind it. So Barrett, you were thinking, why didn't he run in 2020? Why is he waiting till now?
Yeah. So my question that I would ask him if I ever got the opportunity to interview him would be, why did you wait until there was already a Democrat president incumbent? On the by and by, I'm not saying every single time, but on the by and by, nobody ever primaries the sitting president. So I'm trying to figure out if he has a good message, and some of his message is good. Some of the Democrats hate his message, even though he was a Democrat. Some of his message is good, but he would have had a better opportunity to express his message back in 2020 election, because it would have been an open primary. By doing a primary against a sitting president, which just almost never works, it just seems like that's a particular waste.
Maybe he thinks President Biden is doing that bad of a job.
Yeah, that would be the only thing that I could think of. But obviously he has had to pivot and remove himself from the Democrat side and run as an independent, because he's just being shut out. And if he didn't know that was going to happen, then somebody advised him poorly. But still, as an independent, he almost should have started as an independent, honestly. But still, if you have, about 40%, 30, maybe actually I think it's about 30%. 30% are Republicans, about 37%, I think, are Democrats, and then the rest are independents. And so if he could actually get the independents, because you have the moderates in the middle, and then the independents that lean right and the independents that lean left, he could appeal to a lot of that population, which is a significant portion of the population. I'm not quite sure. The media has just really poo-pooed on him. They're not giving him any media coverage. He often has to go on Fox News in order to get any TV time.
Yeah, I've heard him on a number of conservative podcasts, and I applaud anybody if they're on the other side, or if they identify as being on the other side, and being willing to appear on the other side's media. So
right.
Good for him. I do like him. I don't agree with probably half of his policies, but if I do think that if President Trump wins again, I would like to see him in the cabinet somewhere. I heard a while back that a good theory for him would be to go after the pharmaceutical companies, because that's kind of his specialty, and I would be cheering him all the way.
Like his father, Attorney General?
Yep.
I mean, that's within the realm of possibility. But we wanted to bring this to you. Again, we're not advocating for RFK Jr. We really didn't advocate for anybody. We did a profile on every single presidential candidate. There's obviously only very few of them left. But still, we wanted to just at least bring it to light. I mean, he is offering a different State of the Union, and it's that period of time where Democrats and Republicans are talking about the State of the Union, and we wanted to make sure that we got an opportunity to share this with you. So thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned after these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all of the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.
Well, here's a no-brainer. Oregon became the first state in the country to roll back their decriminalization of illegal drugs. Welcome to Azimuth Podcast. I'm Barrett McNabb, and I'm with me is my beautiful wife, Kimberly McNabb. So 3 years ago, Oregon became the first state, again, to decriminalize hard drugs. And we're talking heroin, meth, LSD, all of these things, definitely marijuana, all of these things. And they had a couple of statistics that happened after the decriminalization. Kimberly,
Shocker.
What are some of the shocking statistics?
So Oregon saw a 13-fold increase in overdose deaths from synthetic opioids from 2019 through to June 2022, and 54% of Oregon voters believe Measure 110 increase homelessness. Now, being from rural Georgia, a lot of meth, a lot of pot, a lot of drug use. And so coming from areas like that, you're like, really? You have to think about this? It's
crazy.
Like, if my crackhead friends had more access to drugs and not get in trouble, what would happen? It's like, come on.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems the shocking thing. The shocking thing is the politicians didn't think that drug use would increase when you were not enforcing the laws and you decriminalize it.
Again, the wolf in the sheep's clothing of empathy, like, oh, well, if they go to jail, then it's going to be harder for them to get a job, and it's going to be harder for them to get housing. No, addiction makes it hard to get a job, because you won't be able to keep it. You will not show up on time. You will be slurring your words and moving around in all sorts of crazy ways, being a safety hazard. Even if you do show up, housing, you won't remember to pay your rent, or you will have spent all of your rent money on drugs. And then if you have kids, you'll probably spend all of your money on drugs and not your kids, and get your kids taken away. So, no, spare me.
Yeah, I mean, how could you not think about the second and third order effects of doing this? It's almost like, this is kind of an analogy I have. It's almost like being surprised that you award women's suffrage and giving them the right to vote, and then being surprised that women vote. I mean, it truly is. I kind of equate it to that. I mean, it truly is. So, but to the point, the Measure 110 didn't legalize drugs, but it removed prison sentences and imposed $100 fines that could be eliminated if users contacted a hotline to undergo additional screening.
Which, people don't care if it's legal or not. They care about going to jail.
Right.
But it's the first state to reverse this policy. So I guess better late than never. I went to Portland.
Yeah.
And it is a gorgeous area outside of Portland. But it was just like a third world country. And, you know, people think, oh, well, we don't want them to go to jail. We feel sorry for them. No, you need to feel sorry for the people they're going to rob, trying to get drug money. You got to feel sorry for the people that they may kill in the process, because when your brain is on drugs, you are doing and saying things that you normally would not do. If you're living on the street and on drugs, you're probably going to use the bathroom on yourself, but you know what? You're going to be too high to care.
Neglect children?
Neglect children. I mean, do all sorts of things that you normally would not do. And so, you know, you're not helping them. And then what about the businesses? Okay, no one wants to go to a business where a drug addict is sleeping in the doorway or have a bunch of tents set outside. They're not going to feel safe. They're not going to go to that business, and then business is going to shut down. That's less revenue for the city. The city can't afford to provide services to people who need it. I mean, it's just this trickle-down effect of people that you should feel sorry for, not the crackheads. Sorry,
right.
wrong people.
This vicious cycle. It's absolutely vicious cycle. One of the things that, being a criminal justice major, one of the tenets of lowering crime is that the punishment needs to be swift, certain, and severe.
Sounds like children.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, the trial, the arrest, it needs to be swift. You have to know that it's coming for you. The punishment is coming. It's certain, and then it needs to be severe. It needs to be painful enough so that there is not recidivism, and by having somebody be able to just call a hotline and say, "Hey, I'd like my $100 fine waived." Drugs are bad. Okay, yeah, I agree. Drugs are really bad. Okay, $100 fine. And then you're released on your merry way. You know what did that do?
Right, and the thing you said about needing to be swift is, this is a very basic analogy, but okay, which are you going to take more seriously? A diet you know you have to do today or Monday? Well, guess what? We all say Monday never comes, right? So justice never comes for the crackhead. But, you know, drugs don't just affect the families, which it does. It affects the businesses. It affects tourism, another revenue for the cities.
Right.
So, yeah. And then still, people have not really learned their lesson, though. So a clinical professor said, we can't think of Oregon's efforts as a failure because it was never given a chance to get off the ground. You had 3 years.
3 years. And the drug use went up, so it worked for the drug users.
Yeah, I'm sure they're happy with it.
I don't know what this person is talking about.
What are you waiting for? It sounds like, you know, when people advocate for socialism and then you argue back, well, it's been tried in other countries. It didn't work there. Oh, but we can make it work here.
They didn't do it right. They didn't do it right.
What makes you think you're so perfect and smart that you can do that? I mean, I tell our kids all the time, one of the wisest things you can do is learn from other people's mistakes so you don't have to do it yourself. I mean, just...
Right. I mean, and during the process, to that professor's point of saying it never got a chance. So the hotline was there. The app was there, whatever. But only about 1% of people that actually received the citations contacted the addiction screening line, probably because they didn't have any money to pay the $100, and the police didn't go looking for them. So if there was, hey, look, we had a 50% people call in and they want to get well, I could see it. But after 3 years, only 1% contacted the addiction. Well, yeah, it was tried and it failed.
Well, that's because drug addicts don't want help.
Yeah.
I mean, because if they wanted help, they'd do it. They love being high.
Right.
I mean, it takes such a powerful effect of the brain. See all these like CT scans of drug addicts. I mean, your brain is just lit up like a Christmas tree. Of course,
right.
You don't want to let that go.
Well, I mean, Republicans have always said that to be part of the program, the treatment should have been a requirement, not a suggestion.
Right.
I mean, to suggest, hey, if you want to get treatment that's available for you, okay, thanks a lot, appreciate it, and then go off and get high again. No, it should have been a requirement from the get-go.
Yes, and now we all know people who have actually been to rehab and then have to repeat it. It has to be an effective rehab program.
Sure.
And just like therapists, maybe a third or actually do a good job. I mean, so not all rehab programs are going to be truly effective, but, also it's better than shooting up
Right.
and not being forced to go to rehab at all. But typically, faith-based rehabs tend to do better. AA even advocates for admitting there's a higher power than yourself. And also, I've heard former addicts say, I realized I needed to do this when I stopped blaming other people for my problems. And I think one reason why we live in a culture where drug use is going up is not only do they sing about it rap songs and do movies and downplay it in movies and all that happens, but also we're teaching this Marxism victimization mindset in schools and in our culture. And so, nothing's really our fault.
Can't be my
I'm
fault.
a good person. America's bad. Why try to help it anyway? And go serve a bigger purpose. There's no God. Why serve a bigger purpose outside of myself? This makes me feel good, so I'm going to do this.
Right.
But anyway.
So they changed the law. And so now possession of illicit drugs is a misdemeanor, punishable by 6 months in jail, while encouraging the authorities to refer people to treatment. It also, there's a little bit of a carrot there as well. It also allows for possible record expungement upon the completion of the treatment, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah. So it's a step in the right direction. Hopefully it'll work. That record expungement should appeal to the sympathetic vote. But yeah, a Republican Senate Minority Leader Tim Nobbs said Measure 110 was not what Oregonians thought it was going to be. They were told that their family, their friends were going to get treatment for addiction, and it turned out free-for-all public use, drug use, and increased fentanyl, opioid overdose deaths, increasing exponentially, and Oregon is becoming seen as a national dumpster fire, which I can tell you, I was in Portland in 2021, so yeah, this was in full swing. It was pretty bad, which is such a shame. It's like just gorgeous scenery, waterfalls outside of the city, and then oh my God, get me out of here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess people need to see the movie Dope Sick that has
Yes.
Michael Keaton. I didn't see that one, but I've seen Clean and Sober with Michael Keaton as well. But still, obviously drugs are going to make you do things that you'd never do.
Yes, I thought Dope Sick was absolutely phenomenal. I believe it takes place in rural Arkansas.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, like we've said several times, it makes you do things you normally wouldn't imagine doing, chasing that high. And the character that Michael Keaton played that fully described him. Just to get high became his reason to être.
Right.
Nothing else mattered.
We saw this. We wanted to bring it to you. I'm glad that Oregon has come to its senses. It seems as though that you would do a little bit of predictive analysis and figure out if we allow people to do drugs, what are they going to do? They're going to do drugs. But at least they've realized, hey, look, we tried this experiment, and I hope it's a lesson learned for other states to take this as a life lesson that if you are soft on crime and soft on drugs, it just exacerbates the problem. So thank you so much for watching Azimuth Podcast, and stay tuned after these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all of the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.